Ji, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this conversation on the economy, which is at a critical juncture. We demonstrated very recently that we have capabilities to ensure one critical element of national security, which is defense. And we learned, and the world learned, that we can extend our capabilities to really the frontiers as far as defense is concerned. National security का जो दूसरा component है वो economic security होता है. Economic security में we need to move away from where we've been in the last 20 years. ये जो हमारा boom और bust का cycle है कि हर 3-4 साल के साथ balance of payments crisis हो जाता है. And as a result of that, we are unable to increase our growth rate above a paltry 2 to 3%, which means that we are not generating jobs for our people, productive jobs for our people. And therefore, these are not great indicators of economic security. So we have to catch up. We have to catch up with the other pillar, the pillar of defense security. The economic security pillar just simply has to catch up. We have good news on that. A critical component of that security is stabilization, which means कि हमारे reserves build up हो जाएं, fiscal prudence आ जाए, fiscal deficit out of control ना हो, और सबसे important चीज inflation control में आ जाए. And we have demonstrated through sacrifice and discipline that we can do that. But we have done this before also. What we have not been able to do is to move from that to a restructuring of the economy, which results in a permanent avoidance of a balance of payments crisis, which is internally generated. एक तो balance of payments crisis होता है ना, external shock कोई हो गया. But our crises are internally generated crises. And we really need to restructure the economy. जी ये किसी साहब का mic on है, if you can switch it off, that'll help. Okay, so we really now move to the next phase of restructuring the economy so that the economy becomes internationally competitive, so that our exports allow us to maintain a current account deficit which is sustainable. So shifting towards exports has become absolutely critical. Lots of factors will obviously affect that. But if you look at experience the world over, tariffs play a very important role. High tariffs, and unfortunately for a variety of reasons, कुछ हमारी budget की ज़रूरियात थी, कुछ influentials की ज़रूरियात थी. We have now ended up as one of the most protected countries in the world. Now, with this high level of protection, there are two consequences. One is that downstream industry, which uses imported materials in order to export products, finds it very expensive. But the other equally bad outcome is that not exposed to competition, our industry loses productivity. And the World Bank has recently done a study, a very comprehensive study, which demonstrates clearly that Pakistan industry is experiencing productivity decline. So both of those have to be arrested. Now, there's a huge experience worldwide that tariff reforms play a critical role in that. They make it easier to export, and they expose domestic industry to some competition. So with that in mind, it seems that the government is devising a tariff reform program. I'm told that it's a program that will be rolled out over a 5-year period. So what we are trying to do today is to get a discussion going among captains of industry and representatives of the government to hear views, which will be diverse views, on A, the importance of export-led growth, and B, the importance of tariff reform to achieve that. So that's the context that I wanted to give. So with this, I hand over to my colleague, Nazish Shafraz. She's going to moderate this discussion, and my other colleague, Usman Khan, who's also going to moderate the second. Okay, so Nazish will stay throughout the session, and that's great. So we have some good speakers. Nazish will have to discipline us so that we speak. We take enough time to speak, but at the same time leave time for others to speak. And it's a difficult task, but I'm sure Nazish will do it splendidly. So over to you, Nazish.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I've put it up here so nobody hates me at the end of it. So I've put some housekeeping rules here. But before we begin the discussion, I'll request Usman Khan to give us a couple of slides on what the thinking behind the tariff reform is, and then we'll move on to the World Bank team to talk a little bit about the process and what the reforms are, and then we will open the floor to discussion, and I'll talk more about how I'm going to moderate the discussion when we get to that part. So over to you, Usman.
Thank you, Nazish. Thank you, Dr. Nabi, for this opportunity, and thank you, friends. I think most of the people on the call I have engaged over previous work or in one capacity or the other. So while the slides are just loading up, Eva, are they shared? Because I cannot see them yet.
Yes, just a second. I'm just sharing them. Just a second. I think it's...
Eva, slides. Okay. There is internet, maybe, but next slide, please. Just click on all. So, Jaz sort of very eloquently explained our main problem. I just, without sort of danger of repeating, but sort of highlighting some quick facts, right? So our economic performance has been, quite, in terms of per capita growth, has been very low. It's about 1.3% over the last decade. Falling investment, it was 14% into 2024. There's a chronic fiscal stress, a debt stress that keeps on increasing, interest payments exceeding half of revenue, although this year we'll wait for the budget numbers as the markup costs have gone down, but still it's substantially because the local debt, domestic debt has increased over the last year. So overall economic process, the cycle of boom and bust keep on repeating itself. And the Jaz also mentioned, as soon as we hit the 3.5 to 4% growth, we move into a current account problem. Similarly, so foreign exchange is critical enabler of growth. However, the real exports per capita have been near stagnant over 40 years. So I think if you look at the chart in the lower corner, right corner, Pakistan's per capita export has not grown over the last 4 decades. And I think that is the critical problem we are talking about. Now, some literature also talks about, in terms of our higher reliance on remittances, at the moment, if we talk about exports figure between 32 to 35 billion, and remittances this year are expected to touch $40 billion, so it's a part of a Dutch disease problem, like the oil dollars, in terms of how much pressure do we really have to really make our export competitiveness. But without that, the economic performance is not going to improve. Similarly, the manufacturing performance has been below par as well. It has maintained modest at 5.2%, substantially gone down, especially the large scale manufacturing as compared to our peers, India and Vietnam, where it has been in double digit. And similarly, export-led industrial growth is now the preferred solution. Potential for huge value addition from upgrading plant and skills, employment, and also sort of earning the foreign exchange through export. So that's the broader problem statement we look at. Next, please, slide. Now, these are again well-documented barriers, so I won't really spend that much time. The sector is here and they will talk about it, but, supply chain inefficiencies and cost of inputs. Very recently, we are concluding a study with Pakistan Business Council on the road logistics sector, for example, and there are a high degree of inefficiencies if we look at across that logistic value chain, which actually impacts export costs substantially, and that is again, a key detractor to performance. Similarly, we've had limited success at the integration within the global value chains. Today's discussion, as it is focused on tariffs, so we've been having distortive tariff regime and also failed experiments for import substitution, which has not really worked. Then again, tax policy, tax rates, and tax procedures continue to be hindering factors, and is repeatedly reported by the private sector as constraints. Regulatory complexity and unpredictability of the policy. Similarly, with emerging climate and green issues, standards and compliance are becoming greater barriers, and similarly, NTBs are also rising with the focus on climate and measures like CBAM, which will actually mean that we need to alter the ways how we export. Next, please. So the new tariff policy, the information that is open in public at the moment. So it's a first aggressive step, I think, since 2002. For a more substantial tariff rationalization, which is to be implemented starting financial year 2026, which is in just a month's time. Now, obviously, it's a phased implementation over 4 years or 5 years, but the ambition is to reduce the average weighted tariff from about 10.6% to 7.2%, so making a 1% average reduction in the first year. Obviously, it talks about a gradual reduction so that the impacts are somewhat absorbed as well. Reduction in number of existing custom duty slabs from 5 to 4, with peak tariffs lowered from 20% to 15%. So the maximum capping will be at 15%. Now, what is more ambitious about it is the inclusion of the automobile sector, the energy sector in these tariff reforms. As you know, in previous tariff policies, auto sector, mines and minerals, and somewhat some local elements have been left out of the policy, but with the pressure from IMF and how the policy is shaped up, there is going to be no exclusion. So that is what makes the overall tariff policy much more ambitious. And then obviously the focus on trade facilitation and regional integration. So zero tariff custom duties on 261 tariff lines from the D8 countries. So that's the sort of scope of the policy that is being discussed. Now, the new tariff policy again, no, next, please, next slide. So what do these reforms plan to achieve? Obviously, the major first objective is to boost export-led growth. So as Ijaz mentioned also, so lowering duties on imported raw materials, components, and machinery, obviously reduce access costs and production costs, enhancing price competitiveness of export industries. Similarly, industrial competitiveness, so lower tariff barriers enable firms to import specialized inputs and technologies, helping them to become part of global production networks and, the GVC's concept. Similarly, attracting investment and jobs. So, trade is a good way to actually attract joint ventures when, you are able to actually import capital equipment cheaper. So it spurs industrial growth and forms, so results in more partnerships. Similarly, reduce costs and curb inflation. When we talk about reduction of tariffs on final goods, obviously that is where it pushes down the inflation as well. And obviously moving towards sustainable development with tariffs going down and more and making it easier transition towards green economy and reducing the environmental impact. So these are the broader objectives that we want to achieve under the policy. Next, and I think that's fine. So key points for discussion, which then I'll hand over to Nazish as well. So, what is the overall view of especially the exporters that we have on this ambitious tariff reform? And is tariff rationalization enough, or do we need measures to address things such as, for example, Pakistan's high cost of inputs such as utilities, credit, so if we've done some analysis and with the comparison of regional comparators, there is a cost disadvantage of about 10%. And if we include actually China, the cost disadvantage actually increases more than that. And similarly, I had discussions with key exporters when the US tariff action was being discussed, and the absorptive capacity of industry is slightly less as compared to our competitors in terms of the margins that we have. Similarly, the high rate of corporate tax in the region, which is about 29% as compared to the average in South Asia of 26%. Similarly, labor cost and labor productivity and cost per unit of productivity, which is the result of declining productivity that we've had. Higher cost of capital with limited availability. Obviously, package subsidies by comparator countries as well is also something that needs to be looked into. And also land costs for manufacturing and overall. So, things that make us more expensive other than the tariff elements, which obviously needs to be addressed in parallel. So I'll hand over back to Nazish here to set the frame, but I thought I'll stop here for listing some of the points that are other than the tariff part. Thank you.
Thank you, Usman. Very quick yet still comprehensive justification and rationale for why this tariff reforms came to be and what are the remaining sort of non-tariff issues that we will need to address. For those of you who joined early, I had a slide in which I've sort of summarized the discussion points. I think a lot of them are very similar to, it's a mirror reflection of what Usman said. But before we go into that, let me just ask Anna from the World Bank to give us a little bit of brief of their role in this. So Faiza, I think the World Bank slides now.
I believe I'm pulling them up actually.
Hi,
if
Anna,
that's
you
okay.
can share your slides.
Great. Is it visible?
Not yet, but I can see that you started screen sharing, so it might just take a couple of seconds.
Yeah, so maybe while we wait, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. And I think on the topic of export development, the people around the table are the ones that are going to take Pakistan in the direction that it needs to go to. So very glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation. Is it showing now?
Yes.
So this is very quick. We've actually been working in this area for quite a bit, and I've had a series of research engagements, and so just wanted to highlight a few and also share insights on our research on the role that tariff reform plays in export competitiveness. So this is a number that's familiar to a lot of us. It's the 60 billion a year. It came out of a World Bank report, the untapped export potential for Pakistan. And so if we look at the exports as a share of GDP over the years, it's obvious that Pakistan is lagging behind. In the 90s, it used to outperform comparator countries. Now it's below some of our key comparators, and the export potential is about half of what it should be. And this is, oh, I'm sorry. Is it still on the first slide?
Yes, it's on the first slide.
Okay, I'm not sure what's happening. I'm changing it, but
Do you want to reload the slides?
yes, let me try. Apologies for that. Don't know what's.
I'm the only one who was carefully listening to it, so that's why.
Thank you. Let's try this again. Okay. Am I on screen now?
Nope. But I can see again that you've started the screen sharing, so yeah.
Okay, I'm not. Is it switching now?
You have to click on the active application. Like if you're presenting on PowerPoint, you need to have PowerPoint as your active application. Then only does it share.
Yeah, I think she is
It
already
is.
because it is, we did see the first page before, so it has to be the right window.
Yes, it's just not switching. In the interest of time, maybe we can move on and I can sort of come at the end if that would be still useful. I wouldn't want to delay
For
it.
sure. And Anna, another way is that you email the slides to CDPR because then there is, it doesn't disrupt your speaking, and they can work on uploading them and sort of changing the slides and whatever technical issues there are.
Yes, that could work. So please continue, and apologies, everyone. Not quite sure what's happening.
Okay, so do you want me to start the discussion, and then whenever you're ready with the slides, we can come back to this. Faiza, if you could put up the housekeeping rules and the discussion points. So we are very honored, and we're very lucky to have such a large group of people from the private sector and from the government sector. We've got academics and researchers who've been working in this space. So I'm looking forward to a really good discussion. What I had in mind was that first of all, the discussion points, right? So we don't go too far off topic and everybody gets a chance to speak. The first issue to discuss is, do these proposed tariff reforms meet the objectives of greater global competitiveness for Pakistani businesses? And of course, Sman's talked about how they do that. It's greater transparency. And I think one of the things he didn't mention was also improved allocative efficiency, because whenever you have tariffs that are higher on one sector compared to the other, or inputs relative to outputs, so on and so forth, there are distortions, and that leads to allocative inefficiency. So there's a lot of simplification that is happening there as well. So we should expect improvements in competitiveness. So will it meet that target? And then I want to focus on what are the main concerns with how this tariff is coming into being, and what exactly it's going to be doing. The negative consequences, both unintended and intended. Of course, it's going to become a less cushy space for some sectors that were more protected, and that's the idea behind it. But there are also likely to be some unintended consequences that we would like to unpack. And when we talk about those concerns and unintended consequences, I also want to keep the discussion really constructive and productively contributing to our tariff reform efforts. And maybe we can brainstorm together what are the other non-tariff methods that we can use to address those concerns. And I think many of you will be familiar with the new industrial policy literature and the kind of measures that they are. We can bring them in there. So on, some more housekeeping. So I would ask you to restrict yourself to no more than 2 minutes. And Faiza or somebody from the CDPR team is going to put in the chat box when you're close to the 2 minutes. So I would request you to please not turn me into a demon with fangs who has to shut people down, and just respect that time limit. That would be great. Don't repeat points. If the point has already been made, you can endorse it or you can augment it, but please don't repeat it. And also, if you don't get a chance to speak, or if you want to reflect on what other people are saying, and you say that in the chat, I'll sort of attempt to sort of consolidate those comments and bring them in a sort of time cost effective way. I want to first request people from the private sector, and we have exporters, and we have businesses that cater to the domestic market. So we will get a sense from both sides of how they're likely to be affected. So I'll first invite views from there, and starting with chambers, because chambers will reflect the viewpoints of all of their members, hopefully. And I'll ask you to raise your hands if you're from a chamber first, and then take your comments, and then a couple of comments from other different sectors. And I'll take one comment from each of the sectors. So one from garments, one from footwear, one from fisheries, so on and so forth, initially at least. And then we can open the floor for discussion, and maybe people from researchers or people from the public sector can come in at that stage and respond to those views that have been raised, and then we'll take views from from the private sector again. And if that sounds okay, I will ask Ehsan Saab, would you like to go first with the Pakistan Business Council? I did see Ehsan Saab. Ehsan Malik, Pakistan Business Council.
He's on mute.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, if Sarhad Chambers, does somebody from the Sarhad Chambers want to go next?
Yes, I am here.
Ji, please, let's have your views first.
Okay. Tariff rationalization curbs overprotection of the local industry. That's fine. That's a global phenomenon. But what our concern at the Chambers of Commerce is that we are basically importing two types of products. One are the finished goods, and the other are the raw materials or semi-finished goods. If this tariff rationalization is restricted only to the raw materials or the semi-finished goods, it would not hurt the local industry. But only today, there was a very big article in Business Recorder which says that tariff rationalization is going to kill the local industry. So that's our main concern. Like, if I have to make a shirt out of a fabric, and the same shirt is allowed to be imported into Pakistan under rationalized or lowered tariff, that would definitely hurt the local industry. That's our main concern.
Mariska, I can come in now if I'm unmuted. Can I?
G, sure. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think we have no dispute with the fact that, you know, if you have unlimited, indefinite, and unconditional protection, that's not good for anyone really, right? We also have no disagreement with the fact that the major imperative that we have in the economy is to support exports, right? Particularly value-added exports there. My major concern is that, you know, when you make a sweeping statement like tariff reforms, etc., you do not focus enough on what are the sectors that are primarily impacted by higher costs. So what I'm trying to get at is, for example, if textiles are our major exports, then within that there are obviously subsectors that are producing goods and supplying those at a higher cost than they should be, higher than they ought to be. So, for example, we know that man-made fibers that come out of Pakistan are not produced at a competitive cost. Dyes and chemicals are also not produced at a chemical cost. So if we were to rationalize the import tariffs there, it would make a huge amount of help. However, if you take the steel industry makes construction items, so that's not export oriented. They do supply automobile industry, which also is not an export item. So I think what I'm trying to get at is that, we need to be a bit more focused on the export sectors and identify where they are impeded by uncompetitive costs, and then focus on that, because you do have time. And I think the other aside from exports, the other major concern is, what about domestic users of goods that are produced by domestic industry? We need to create the choice, and we need to bring the costs of those items down also. But that again, carried to its logical argument, would mean that you would not be producing any of your personal products or toiletries in Pakistan. You would actually be importing all those, and that would have a negative impact on your external account. I'll stop with that.
Thank you so much, Ehsan Saab. Now, do we have any other chambers represented? Sorry, I can see people's names, but I can't see their association. So if not, we'll just move into the sectors. I know that we have quite a lot of representation from the garment sector. So if I could ask,
if I may be allowed, this is Riazuddin representing both Karachi Chamber and Site Association of Industry.
Ji, bilkul, go ahead.
Okay, if you give me, you are giving me another 2-3 minutes to talk about the issue of tariffs.
Yes.
To begin with, actually, the function of the tariff is not simply the protection of the industry, but beyond that, it is about revenue generation, protection of domestic industry, regulation of trade and economic policy, and obviously consumer protection. So all these topics are pertinent and relevant and should have been taken into account for this whole discussion. We admit and acknowledge that there has been problems with Pakistan's tariff system, which we have been discussing with the National Tariff Commission only 2 weeks back in the run-up to this, the changes being brought in and rationalization of tariffs. It has been marred with duplicity and multiplicity of rates, statutory rates, regulatory rates, and additional custom duties and whatnot. And they need to be consolidated definitely into one to make them transparent and easy to understand and easy to implement and assess duties and taxes and collect the dues from there. Pakistan's tariff regime obviously has had bumpy rides, and there has been undesirable outcomes. So we need to learn from that. There has been distortions, interferences from obviously vested interests and groups, weak enforcement, some sort of rent seeking, and also all that has resulted in the unintended consequences of reduced competitiveness of the local manufacturing sector and the industries, as Ehsan Saab has just indicated. So we think that tariffs needs to be definitely rationalized. They need to be brought down. There has to be to do it in a proper and predictable manner. What we say, the rationalization and cascading of tariffs. Fewer categories and clearly divided into, let's say, essential goods, basic raw materials, intermediate goods, plant machinery, and obviously there can be a class of luxury and capital goods which are not so essential, and they can be taxed at a higher rate. So in order to protect the local industry, it is not only the tariffs which are pertinent, but the other policy pillars, which I would say are fiscal policy, monetary policy, the infrastructure availability and provisions, the industrial policy, which is still at large, the trade policy, which we have not been able to put up for quite a number of years, and then comes the tariff side. So all these are very important and pertinent and needs to be put together, because competitiveness just do not come through tariff rationalization or erecting tariff barriers. And also, at this particular juncture, when the winds and tides are turning into an opposite direction, and there are, let us call it the super tariff era initiated by Trump. So are we at the right side of the history and doing it at right point in time? That we also need to ask. So I'll leave here. I think my 2 or 3 minutes are over.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sticking to the time. And absolutely, I think you brought up a very interesting dimension that we are in a global context right now where there seems to be more protection and inward looking behavior, and there's the rise of industrial policy overall. So in that context, how does that look? But yeah, before I take, specific comments on this, let me just see if there's anybody from chambers that are left. Do we have Kamran Said Saab from the Lahore chambers? Hina just messaged me that he is here. Otherwise, I think, yeah, let's go for garments now. Do we have any representation from the garment sector?
Yes, right here, right here.
Ji.
Aswar, carry on, Aswar.
Ji, go ahead.
I can pitch in. So I think on the garment side, main problem has been that we have created islands and haven't built a continent. The supply chain is very fragmented, and the industry suffers from lack of innovation, and the material availability is very limited to just a few product classifications. So I think that's where we've missed out. The products we are primarily making are related to cotton products, but we've missed the boat on anything that's synthetic, and tariffs are a barrier to that side of the business. And I think with the tariffs going down on those raw materials and product categories, it would open a whole new era of growth for the SMEs and also for the industry, because access to materials is one thing, But the other thing is also that at the same time, we've got to build a robust supply chain that talks to each other and works with each other. And that's something that's been missing because of policies that make it detrimental to work with each other, including how sales tax flows and how people are kept away from cooperating and working in partnerships on the supply chain side. So that's my take on it. But I think that if we focus on some of the key categories on the textile side, the industry structure already exists, the machinery exists, the training exists, and we could start converting a lot more raw material into finished products and grow in exports very quickly.
Okay, good, great. So we're expecting growth in the garments and textile sector because you can now import man-made fibers. Okay, great. Ji Azuddin sir? Azuddin sir, आप muted हैं.
Yeah, okay. मैंने इसको खोल लिया. My question was, the last question, is this the most opportune time to undertake tariff rationalization, particularly in the wake of the global challenges and the world going back to tariff barriers?
Gee, absolutely. I think we can come to that. Although I think what we have witnessed here is, with the Trump tariffs, they came on in really full force. And I think he ended up really seeing a lot of correction in the kind of responses that came from government. And he realized that if essentially, if I isolate everybody, I'm isolating myself. So there is also a kind of pushback that has happened to their economy. And I think they have really suffered with even that announcement, however short it was. Acha, ab now we can, I think, move on to, there is also fisheries sector here. So let's go to agri next.
Sajjad Salim. I think Mr. Sajjad Salim.
Sajid B, go ahead.
Right. Sorry, just to add on to what Asfar has already said, the whole concept is great, but we all have to wait and see when we go down to the HS code level and as to what they bring to the table. That's what worries me right now. In a manner that if they start bringing down the tariffs on chocolates and all that stuff, and not on the stuff that will lead to export growth, then we're in trouble. And there's a lot of opposition from the FBR. There's a lot of opposition from APTMA even. And then just to add on to what the representative from PPC said was regarding steel, for instance. Now we're talking about export growth. So if I'm exporting more, I need to build buildings. I need to build new units. So if you will protect steel, then that's more cost to me. And obviously, cash is what we need to grow our exports. So again, my fingers are crossed. The concept is great, but I just have a feeling from what I'm hearing is that we might get the wrong HS codes done this year, and yet we would then say that we need to boost exports and these guys are non-productive and they don't know what they're doing. So let's hope we don't get into that, because the paradigm shift must take now. We must move away from the import substitution and must look at the export growth. And for that, the decision obviously is with the government, and we'll see what they bring to the table. And if it is something which, as Asfar has said, helps us go into the synthetics, we will see a rapid growth, hopefully, based on the Salcott model and how they have stockists that, and hopefully we'll have more and more stockists that we can, pick stuff off the shelf from them, in-demand fabrics and all of that. So we hope that we can build a critical mass where the supply chain is robust and it's strong. So let's see what they bring to the table. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Ayaz. I'm Chairman Prigmia, North Zone. I agree with Asfar and Sajid Saab that this is the one side of the picture. And the second side of the picture is circularity when we are talking about circular model. So, the major, when we talk about circular model, the supply chain is really important. And supply chain with no connections with our vendors, number one. Number two, with the spinners from the, from regen cotton till we take it to the recycler. There is no such connection exist. Although under the DGTO, we are 21 different chambers and associations, they are working, but they are not unified. I think this is the point. This is the high point, that we all gather on one place and make a one platform. We don't want to change the ID of each association or chamber, but we should have one group, a unified group, sitting in somewhere in SIFC or somewhere, in the chamber or anywhere in Islamabad, to discuss the matter. Because something which is helping me but it is bothering my other associate or a supply chain related field. So the rationalization of the taxes always happens in the developed countries when they have all the data. Unfortunately, we lack that. And look at the forward, in next couple of years, what is going to happen? They are bringing digital product passport. They want to have a traceability in the system. And that comes with the challenges and with the opportunities as well. For example, I take one example of biodiesel. We have hundreds of restaurants who fry things, and that's a vegetable base, and that biodiesel is actually carbon free and sulfur free. So that gives a carbon neutrality to our scope 3 emissions. You see, this is one of the bigger advantage we have. Even if we are expensive, but if we are carbon neutral, people are going to buy from us, because the scope 3 neutrality is one of the added advantage as an export destination. Because all the brands, they have to get neutral by 2020, 2030 or 2045, and they have already signed it. For example, Zara, H&M, all my buys, or Nike or Adidas, everyone has already committed. So we have to see, the first thing is we can unify our resources. We can sit down and we'll see all the aspects, because these are the the sessions we have, but they are off and on. There is no connectivity. Maybe in your next session we won't be attending and somebody else will come, and there is no minutized reporting of this session comes to us. You should minutize and make us part of that, of in a way that this is created as a think tank, and there is a follow up on that. So just commenting on one thing is a different thing, and just be part of that situation where we are actually building the export resilience in Pakistan is a different thing. So this is my take, that we should take some initiative to sit down together, all these trade, especially textile sector, because that's a major employer and the major exporter component of our total gross exports. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just very curious about something, because earlier in the discussion, somebody said that they have been part of conversations about these tariff reforms for the last 2 weeks. So I just wanted to get a sense also in your comments of how consultative it has been, and have your views been sought on the direction that the government has been taking with the tariff reforms. I'm just going to go from the top of my list. I've got Mia Khalid at the top, and if I could ask.
Thank you, Nazir. Yes, I'll just add to what Dr. Saab was saying, that this happens a lot. For example, I'm representing Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Association. So it happens, for example, we are looking at this as export-led growth. So we go and we say, okay, you rationalize the tariffs on certain raw materials because those products are in demand and we do not manufacture them locally. And next, somebody will come in and they'll say, okay, we have started manufacturing them locally, and they'll then put regulatory duty or additional custom duty on it, without realizing that, for example, if you are exporting to developed countries or high value markets, then they need a minimum quality documentation for a material to be considered at a certain level. And without those documentation or without that trail, they will simply not allow you to export to their country. So you end up in a way, you go to a meeting, they agree with your point of view, and to come back and 1 month later, something else has happened. So this is, I think, what Dr. Saab was saying from Pragma's behalf also. And this is something that needs to be rationalized, or the better system needs to come up to actually take the right takeaway from a meeting, that this if is decided, and this means that once it is decided, and it will not change in the next week or so. And this happens quite a lot, whether it's regarding machinery import, which is sometimes necessary to conduct certain testing. Again, specifically talking from the pharmaceutical perspective, there are some things that we have no way around. So if you are required to test something on USP specs, which is United States pharmacopoeia specs, you have to follow that. You don't have any way around it. And there are certain equipments that are tailored, for example, like 31 CFR compliance, which is an FDA requirement that the data integrity must be ensured. Then there are local companies which are maybe manufacturing the same equipment, but they don't have the softwares that allow this. These are fine points, but these final points for non-technical people or people who are not directly related with that industry, they sometimes don't understand. And when one person says that this is non-compliant and the next person comes in and says, no, this is compliant, and they agree at the same time, and then they reverse or change the previous decision. So these are some things that keep on happening. And once in a budget or a finance act or any other policy or SRO, it's not very easy to just get it reversed. And that sort of spoils your entire plan for export to a particular country, or growth in export to a country that you are already exporting to. And I don't know what the right solution will be. And if we can do something about that, maybe getting minutes in writing as to what the finished is. And once that is documented, and if that decision is being changed, it is communicated at some level to the people in the sector, so they can at least respond to it immediately before the issuance of the SRO or the policy. Because again, like I said, once it is issued, it's not that easy to just simply go ahead and ask them to reverse it yet again. So unless we have everybody on the same forum, all the parties giving all the point of view, I think this keeps on happening, and this is not very helpful when we are talking about especially an export growth from Pakistan. Thank you.
So Khalsa, what I'm hearing from you is not just that, policies happen and then are changed, and there's a lot of that kind of instability and unpredictability in the policy environment, but also that the process prior to the policy making has a lot of back and forth. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, as you would be aware, and as all the people who are listening, whether they're from the government side or from the private sector, would be aware that, in an economy like Pakistan or in the political environment of Pakistan, it makes a huge difference who you know and at what level you know them. So the personal level connection or connectivity sometimes overrides I would say, the holistic approach that a sector should be looked at in a way. And I mean, that is part of the reality in Pakistan and in many other countries which have our same socio-economic or political system. So given that that is the reality there, so how do we go about and make sure at least that when we are making the policy, or maybe for lack of a better word, trying to favor someone, let's try to do so in a way that overall the industry doesn't suffer and the industry's point of view is taken well in time, as opposed to after an official meeting and the result, we expect something and actually something else comes up. That's the stark reality that we are faced with here, like in a certain other countries. So accepting that, let's move on and find out a way how to go about solving that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the objectives of this tariff reform exercise is also to remove that kind of discretionary SROs and those kind of discretionary, for certain concessions that are given to certain HS codes and not to others, and to kind of make it a more level playing field where you don't have, SRO based or regulatory, and there's so many para tariffs that come in that really sort of obfuscate what the process is. But before, I think let's move on to a different sector. We had Ali Dada here from the fisheries sector. वो पहले बात करने लगे थे, but I think we sort of cut him short. So please go ahead.
My name is Ali Dada. I'm at the Karachi Chamber of Commerce as well. So we basically submitted budget proposals for every industry, and the way we've done it this time is that we've highlighted the problem, given the solution, the advantages, and the fourth is that the revenue loss, it's going to the revenue loss from that, and but it's going to be an export surplus. So that's as far as the chamber goes. We've done that. Moving on to the fisheries and aquaculture sector, the total fisheries exports of Pakistan is only $450 million, which is nothing. When you look at the total exports of Pakistan, that's about $30 to $32 billion. Aquaculture, if you just talk about India, which is our next door neighbor, and you talk about only one product, which is shrimp. So we put up these shrimp farms, shrimp hatcheries in Pakistan, and the total export of just shrimp of India is close to $6 billion annually. We're targeting at least a growth of $1 billion of shrimp exports in the next coming year. But due to the taxes, duties, the tariffs, what we're experiencing is a 60% tax on an infant industry. So, and if you're a bigger company, when you have these SROs, you still tax 40%. So my thing is that if the industry is an infant industry, there is no revenue, why tax it at 40%? So all the raw materials, for example, the feed, the paddle wheels, all those things that add into your capex are taxed at 40%. So when I make my feasibility, my ROI goes to 20 years. Only if this 40% tax is removed, and we've demanded 0% of these taxes in the budget proposal. If this happens, it's going to give birth to at least 20 different industries just because of agriculture. And I really want to point out something. Our aquaculture fishing industry is totally supply driven. What I mean is that we're always in a shortage of supply and there is always excessive demand. The total shrimp industry's market value is $24 billion. It's not because people don't want to eat more shrimps, but it's because that's the production level right now all over the world. Okay. Besides these tariffs, since MEDA is also one of the departments in this webinar, I've seen that lately post-COVID, MEDA is trying to do something which the industry, which did not support the industry because no longer can they protect small industries because of too much red tapeism. The World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, they've always approached us and they want to give us funding. But when you go to register a simple company in Pakistan, or if you want to align with the government policy that has been written in 1988, just to change that, we need to go to lots of government offices, and just to register a company and be in line with everything, you need at least a year and a half. So
अच्छा अली
this is
साहब थोड़ा सा
something
मुझे
that's
I've got my eye on the time अगर if I can ask you कि देखें जो tax और setting up a business जो business environment के broader concerns हैं I think we will look for a separate forum for them but just specifically on tariff alone if I'm hearing you correctly आप कह रहे हैं कि आपकी जो feed है for the fishery sector that is largely imported so on the tariff reforms alone are you expecting that your sector should be able to grow domestically and exports?
जी फीड की बात नहीं कर रहा मैं बात कर रहा हूँ the raw materials that are used to produce the shrimp in Pakistan.
Okay.
So the raw materials, the equipment, everything is taxed up to 40% at least.
Okay.
So
and by tax, do you mean your tariffs, or I mean, are you talking about corporate tax? I just want to.
Okay. So for tax, I'll break it down for you. There's 25% sales tax. There's 10% regulatory duty. There's 3% some other duty on income tax. So that everything goes up. It's about 40%.
ठीक है. So, okay, so with regulatory duty coming down, we should expect to see an improvement in your import costs.
If you look at India, they're subsidizing the agriculture industry in their country, and we're taxing it. So you see the dilemma.
ठीक है. अच्छा जी, Sarhad Chambers.
Assalamu alaikum. Whatever we are hearing so far about the tariff rationalization is through news reports or hearsay. I want to know from the government people here, has there been any notification or an SRO to this effect, or will this be incorporated in the budget, or will this be incorporated in the import policy order? Can anybody clarify on that? Thank you.
Very good question.
Quickly,
Usman?
and maybe Anna can come on it as well. As far as I understand, so there is work still going on tariff lines. And broadly, I think the proposals are looking at about a 200 billion reduction in tariffs as a result of that. But I think the exact proposals per tariff line are still being worked out. But they will be announced with the budget. That's the idea. Anna, do you have any more information?
That's my understanding that the first year of reforms will be in this year's budget, but I believe there are ongoing conversations and the tariff board is involved.
And Anna and Usman, it'll also be really useful to, because people have been talking about the process also. Is the process of identifying specific tariff lines and doing a kind of tariff line analysis, does that involve stakeholder consultations at all? Is there a formal mechanism for people to give their inputs?
Anna, you may want to come on that.
This is being managed on the government side, and I believe that's being taken into consideration, and they are following due process. We are not involved in those consultations.
Okay, all right.
So just on that, Nazish, just one more. So there are about 8 committees under Minister for Industry. One of them is on export competitiveness and tariffs. So I think they've been having discussions for the last 2-3 weeks. But again, I think the government is doing some form of consultation. But obviously, there's also technical analysis going into what should be the proposals on tariffs. So I think it's a mix of the two.
Okay, I think it'll be useful also to hear from SMEDA at this stage, because they represent the SME sector, and it'll be useful to understand, what kind of conversations they have been engaged in on the tariff reform exercise.
Thank you very much, Nazish. This is Sukratji. So we all realize that there is a total productivity factors decline, which can be partially offset by the improvements in allocative efficiency. This is given. But I think what we need to pitch more is to the industries, and we are trying to do that also, is that this could further reorient the subsidized credit away from the capital intensive markets. And the EFS scheme itself would, sort of dilute and would become part of the longer term financing. So more capital would be available in that way. And the real, sort of problem that our SMEs had been facing was this EFS scheme, that they were not being, sort of remitted and refunded the amounts in time. So this factor is important in that way. The second thing that I feel that we need to further work on is, as PBC also said, Ehsan Saab, that we need to factor in and go down to the level of the HS codes. So maybe for the phase 1, we would want to, highlight only those sort of areas and sectors and subsectors and HS codes which seem and which have an impact more on a higher cost level. So which sectors have an impact wherein the factors of importing would have a greater cost, can be taken up first at the first phase, and we can phase it down to that level wherein after 4 or 5 years we are able to come up to that level wherein we can say the allocative efficiency has been catered to its optimal level. So these are my small bits on it.
Thank you so much. And I've noticed also that Manzoor Ahmed Saab is here. I think it'll be really good. We've had some, feedback from the private sector. Manzoor Ahmed Saab is somebody who, is an expert on these issues, who writes about them as well, and who has his ear on the ground. So Manzoor Saab, agar aap kuch kehna chahein?
Sorry, I'm traveling, so I mean there will be some problem with the voice, etc. I think on the tariffs, I joined late, but I just want to say that on tariffs, some broad principles have been settled, but exactly what happens with each tariff line, that's something else. I mean, so the broad principles are that in auto policy, we'll start from next year, 2026. For other tariffs, we like to have just 4 tariff slabs. That will be 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. But eventually, by the end of the 4th year or in the 5th year, there'll be nothing higher than 15%. And then one other important thing is that there are now on almost 80% of tariff. There is some SRO, some exemption, some certificate, and I think by this year, within maybe some of it this year, maybe some next year, we'd like to bring that what they call fifth schedule back to the normal first schedule, so there'll be only one tariff. And I think these are the general broad outlines. And I think if there are any specific questions, perhaps I could answer.
Okay, sure. But we also have with us Ali Sarfraz Saab. He's Pakistan's permanent representative to the WTO. He's joining us from Geneva. So let me ask him how he sees the situation.
Well, Nazish, thank you very much. I was more interested in listening to others, but I can tell you what's happening multilaterally here is that with the U.S. tariffs and other tariffs coming up from China, also I think the talks between EU and US have not been very successful. With the UK and US, UK has given sort of a mini package, which a lot of people are questioning whether it's actually compliant with WTO rules or not. So what's happening globally is that the age of rule-based trading system is severely impacted, and it's kind of moving towards a bilateral deal-based system. Just to give you a number, the trade under MFN was almost 83% at the beginning of the year, which has dropped down now to 74%. So there is a 9 percentage point shift from trade, which is now done either under the plurilateral agreements or regional trade agreements or bilateral agreements. So that's one part. I think on tariffs, we can't see tariffs in isolation, and the reason we can't see it in isolation because it has to be a part of overall our industrial policy, which we definitely need to have. Every country is working on it. Even UK has now 6 sectors in which they have an industrial policy, and they have to be seen together. I think some of the charges and duties that we have been imposing are not actually WTO compliant, and we have been getting queries and trade concerns raised by other countries with respect to regulatory duties which are not described in our schedules. The fourth thing I would say is devil is in the details. So we'll have to see what is happening at HS code level. Clearly, their rationalization has to be done to simplify it because it's too messy. There are too many SROs and it becomes very difficult. The next point I want to raise is with respect to the unintended consequences would be if we are doing everything in the absence of a clear industrial policy. And by the way, the gentleman talking about aquaculture and fisheries, there are a huge amount of subsidies which is given by developed countries. In agriculture, for example, the entire Ricardian principle has been thrown out of the window because hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies are given. Just to give you one example, the C4 West African countries have been for many years asking to remove subsidies on cotton. And the biggest countries like US and China are just unwilling to remove or give up the huge amount of subsidies they gave to the cotton sector. And hence you see they're not only the major producers of cotton, but also now major exporters of cotton. So on the one hand, while they're reducing tariffs, they are supporting the industry significantly, and so is India. And I think that's something we need to look at in terms of our industrial policy, and we should use tariffs strategically to increase exports, which we have tried in case of auto sector, although the high courts then jump in and give stay orders. And the final point is with respect to the non-tariff measures. If I can address that question, or I can come to that later.
नहीं आप कर लें. I think if you've got the phone right now. Go
So the non-tariff measures, what is interesting, and this comes from the World Bank, that as an economy grows, becomes larger, the number of non-tariff measures actually go very high. And if you look at some of the most developed countries, they have the highest number of non-tariff measures. Some of the policies we really need to get rid of, for example, having export restrictions and then also import restrictions on wheat. That's one of the policies which you used, which becomes completely indefensible here. So I'll stop. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. And Dr. Nabi, before we just move to you, one of the things that I wanted to, the third bullet point that I've got over here, we do understand industry policy is now back in vogue and actually tariff measures are being used, but are tariff measures the best way for us to support our industrial policy objectives? Because increasingly our industrial policy tools are actually changing in shape. And yes, you may have subsidies, but those subsidies are very directly targeted towards activities that have a positive spillovers to the rest of the economy. So perhaps, we direct subsidies towards improvements in HR and productivity, in standards, certifications, all of the things that allow you to move up the value chain, to diversify and to, strengthen and deepen your value chains. So, this is the other thing that, are we expecting tariffs to do a task which can be done by more specific and targeted instruments rather than a more blunt one? But over to you, Dr. Nabi, and then we can come back and get some private sector views.
Thank you, Nazish. I have a question for Ali Sarfaraz and for Dr. Manzoor. And this is a question that I've picked up from the discussion, and it'd be good to get answers. Ali, the question, one question has risen, and I've heard it in the conversation today, but also elsewhere, that now that Mr. Trump of United States is using a deal-based approach to trade, and using tariffs as a basic instrument of deal making, is it still time to think about tariff reform to bring it down? Is it too late to do something like this? So that's a question that Ali Sarfaraz may want to answer, and then Dr. Manzoor, if you like, you can also address that question. But the more specifically, the question to you is that a number of comments have been made which seem to suggest that we must retain some form of cascading, that people who are finishing, who are manufacturing finished products should be treated differently for purposes of tariffs than people who are importing materials as input into their production systems. So the question to you is, does cascading make sense if you want to move towards an export-led growth strategy? Ali first.
Sir, thank you. I would request Dr. Manzoor to go first.
Okay. All right.
Then I can respond.
Sorry, Ji, did you ask me something?
Yes. Okay. I will quickly repeat it. I said a number of questions seems to suggest, and this is from people who run firms and manufacturing units, that cascading is a good thing. That tariffs should vary depending on whether you're putting out a finished product, or you're putting out an intermediate product, or you're putting out a very elementary product. Cascading is a good thing. And also whether in the days of President Trump, we should be lowering tariffs. Shouldn't we use this opportunity? Is it the right time to do this?
Well, I mean, okay, on both things. First, I think, for most other countries, their domestic whatever reforms they are continuing, because it's vis-a-vis the US, there's all that fluctuation. But vis-a-vis other countries, I think whatever they were normally doing, their reforms, etc., are going on. But at the same time, because the US is demanding serious reductions from other countries, offering to bring down their tariffs on many products. US may be exporting to those countries like Pakistan 4 or 5, but no, they are going much beyond that. For example, India has offered to reduce tariffs on 60%. Vietnam has offered to completely eliminate tariffs, all tariffs, and so on and so forth. I mean, many countries. So that's one thing. The other thing is cascading. Dr. Jahnavi, you sent us a chart, and I studied that. And what that said was that countries which have higher cascading are the worst performer in terms of exports. And they gave an example. They said number one cascaded country in the world is Egypt. Number two is Pakistan. Number three is, I think, Iran. And then like that. And they said because of their cascading, they make so much difference between the inputs they get and the final product that there is no incentive for the industry to export. And I can give you a couple of short examples here in Pakistan. For example, we just did this mobile phone industry, and we had very serious cascading, on the components, etc. It's almost zero, and the finished mobile set is very high. So from the day it came, we were hoping that in 2, 3 year, 4 year time, we'll be exporting huge amounts, but we are exporting zero. It's the same thing about autos. It's the same thing about air conditioners. Look at anything; it doesn't get exported because of this cascading, because the end product is so highly protected that and gives such higher profit margin within the country. It gives about 30-40%. And exports, normally the whole world is competing and the profit is around 5%, 6%. So except for textile and clothing, where there's not so much market here, so we export. But anything else, it's all domestically consumed. And I think one big thing is cascading. And we have always had this cascading as a part of cornerstone of our policy. We always fight for cascading. We try to look for cascading in everything. And it doesn't really work. But, we just continue. Maybe, well, I could have given some other figures, but I think it's, I don't have them right now with me. Okay. But I can send a little, a couple of paragraphs or 3 paragraphs to explain why it doesn't work.
Yes, no, that's good. Thank you. While Ali is still sorting out his response, let me just add to the cascading issue of the general tariff reform issue, that when you're just producing for the domestic economy, it's a small market relatively. Your profits are going to be driven by margins. Higher the tariffs, higher the margins. But when you are producing for the global economy, you'll be competing with others. So your profits are driven by volumes. When profits are driven by volumes, you create much more employment than when the profits are driven by margins. Which is why when you look at job creation, our large-scale manufacturing sector, or our formal manufacturing sector, has created a minuscule proportion of the total jobs that are needed in the economy. Most of the jobs are being created by the informal sector. So please keep in mind that a large concern about tariff reform is to orient production towards the global economy, so that you make profits from volumes as opposed to profit from margins, and thereby increasing total employment. Ali, over to you.
I just want to say one line actually on this key. If you look at what has happened in the ASEAN after the ASEAN trade agreement, it's also that you are better able to integrate yourself into global value chains. It's much more seamless. You can source much more readily. So just wanted to support. And Anna, you wanted to say something before Ali.
Yes, so just wanted to make a comment on this discussion around industrial policy. I think now the question is not whether or not to do it, but how to do it. And a government has a list of tools at its disposal. And on the World Bank side, based on our research, tariff policy is usually not even second best or fifth best or 10th best policy. If you look at surveys of firms, which we do through our enterprise survey, it's public. I welcome anyone to go check. The biggest constraints to firms, especially exporters, are around access to finance, energy costs, the predictability and transparency of the regulatory environment. And the list goes on. So using tariff policy as a form of industrial policy to protect local industry, at best is a band-aid solution to some of the real structural problems you're having. And typically industries that enjoy these sorts of protections, so tariff protection, have very little incentive to innovate, to be competitive, and tend to sort of get used to this protection. And that's where you have vested interests now coalescing to keep these policies in place. So the literature on our side points to a lot of other tools that are more effective in supporting the private sector. I would also like to hear thoughts from our firms and industries around the table.
Sorry, Ali, आप पहले अपना you कर लें. I think you've now 3 or 4 people have taken your turn, and then we'll come back.
No, that's absolutely fine. The question Dr. Nabi asked was with respect to the timing of all this. What I can tell you that at this point, all the countries are engaging bilaterally with the US, and even they are engaging bilaterally among themselves. So if you look at India is having a FTA with the UK, with the EU. UK and EU are doing an agreement, and within ASEAN countries, from what I know, that they're having discussions among themselves. So most of the member countries or most of the countries are looking to work bilaterally or plurilaterally to see where the market works. I think that's one point I want to make. If I understand, if my understanding is correct, it's actually an IMF conditionality to rationalize the tariff. I don't know we have much choice in that. And whether the timing is right at this point in time, maybe to some extent, because we are also engaged bilaterally with the US. If we want to offer something to the US, we'll have to offer multilaterally, which means we'll have to rationalize the tariffs on that basis. The third point, and I also want to understand, it's a question with respect to cascading. Generally, the sense is that China has just eroded and captured the whole space for manufacturing. I don't know whether if we reduce tariffs or don't reduce tariffs, it would make much of a difference whether to capture in those particular markets or industries that we typically look at. Whether it's auto, it's manufacturing in terms of machinery, electronics. China has already captured all there's not enough space left. Actually, they have a surplus. The question here and debate here in the WTO right now is a lot of countries, a lot of regions are actually, because of the US tariff, they're concerned that this excess supply will be diverted to their markets. So that's the bigger issue at this point in time. So I actually want to understand whether if we get rid of cascading, would that at all enable us to venture into manufacturing? Is an import substitution a better policy at that point?
Sorry, can I just come in on Ali's, because this is a very important point you raised. And the risk of dumping is a valid risk. But as you know, there are anti-dumping measures, subsidy measures, and counter tariff measures and processes that are in place to address this issue of dumping, which is when a country exports products to your market at below production cost. Best practice is not to use your tariff structure to address those issues. Typically, specific cases of anti-dumping are dealt through established processes, which Pakistan has. And of course, the process could be improved. But then using or hijacking the tariff structure to fix those problems risks, like many of the exporters on this call have mentioned, hiking tariffs on inputs and raw materials that are detrimental to their production processes. So I think there are very credible avenues in place to address what Ali Hussein you've mentioned, and it is a valid concern. But I think it shouldn't be counter to this conversation around tariff reform, which is geared towards export promotion. Thank you.
No, okay. I would like to come in and respond to this. I wasn't referring to dumping in the sense that you are referring to. I am fully aware of anti-dumping laws, and there's an agreement on anti-dumping and countervailing subsidies. I'm not referring to all that. I'm referring to the fact that there is an excess supply of products in the market, and from China, and they will find their way into other markets, which were traditionally sent to the US market. It may not necessarily be covered under the definition of dumping, as we have, but the point is that those products will find route into the other markets, and that's a real fear. They may not be selling at less than their production cost in any case, but still it means that the import bill will go up. And we also need to see that, the way tariffs plays is not just in terms of your trade deficit. It also impacts your currency, which means it impacts your debt, which means also it has an impact on your currency market and on your bond market and equity market, which we have also seen in the case of US. So it's not just as simple as that. Sorry.
So Ali, I want to actually pick up another point that you made, because a couple of other people before you have made this point also, that there will be revenue consequences to this. And again, I want to link that point to the third bullet point, that our tariff policy the best way to be generating a revenue. So I'll leave that question with you guys, and I will go to Umar Masood Saab next, and Ehsan Saab. Umar?
Yes, sorry. I've been hearing this, discussion. It's a very interesting one. So, because of the time available to me, I will not, discuss either the pros and cons of tariff rationalization. I think that is best discussed by industry stakeholders, and where tariff rationalization is actually taking place. It's definitely not taking place at the provincial government level. So, my concern is that the provincial governments will then be just bystanders to what is going to be the effect of any tariff rationalization, either positive or negative, on local industries. And I think over there, many participants have also mentioned this issue, or this challenge of coordination, of talking to each other and trying to understand the issues of various sectors, and trying to coordinate a line of action, which has been very problematic as far as any type of industry-related action is concerned. So if you look at it on all Pakistan level, this is a big challenge. Ali also mentioned about industrial policy. I think that's one area in which I think the provinces really have to step up and play their part. And to be very honest, I would really confess that the provinces have not played that part. Either we have not been sensitized enough about this issue. So I would see whatever is being proposed as more of a silver lining for us, as representing the provincial government, that this is an opportunity where provinces have resources, and they are thinking of way to apply these resources. We have an annual development program, which is a growing annual development program, despite IMF. Now, the idea is, can we apply that annual development program in an intelligent way? Whether you want to call it an industrial policy, call it whatever you want. But what we would like is a better interface with various industrial stakeholders. And we would also like that we need to break away from this tariff argument for a while. and start thinking about industrial policy at a larger and a more longer term scale, if you really want to address the structural issues which our industry face. You know, in 2025, we are still discussing loss of revenue issues, you know, as far as tariff rationalization is concerned. So it pretty much tells me this thing has not moved since the late 1980s. Even that at that time it was, you know, tariff rationalization is loss of revenue. So if that is still I'm sorry, I would use this word, if that is still a cudgel that the industry wants to hold on to, you know, we have to be prepared. And as far as the provincial governments and even the federal governments are concerned, we need to be more forthcoming to understand all the other non-tariff related challenges which industry faces in terms of improving their competitiveness. So if we can talk about that at a separate session, but you know, I think this is where this discussion is eventually going to move. Despite the fact that there are, you know, bilateral negotiations going on, but still the issue of competitiveness still remains. You know, that's the iceberg in front of you, which is still there. You are not competitive, period. That is it. I don't know whether the bilateral treaties or bilateral agreements with the USA, that may be a temporary respite from what is going on. There is a lot of confusion, you know, going on. But I think industrial policy, as everybody has sort of alluded to it, is something that we need to start taking more seriously at all levels of government, including the provinces. That's all that I have to comment on.
Absolutely. Now, I know that there are a couple of hands up, but I'm also conscious that there are some people who have not spoken. So if you don't mind, can I ask Emmett Shafi and Mujtaba Paracha to come in if they have any comments, and otherwise we'll move to the hands.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the opportunity, and wonderful to listen to all the comments here and very important questions, just like put up recently. Okay, are we competitive enough? And whether tariffs are going to matter, and whether tariffs are the right way to protect your local industry or generate employment within the country, or remove uncompetitiveness or the issue of productivity within the country. I'm not so sure. I think Anna mentioned something about tariffs not being the right way to grow your industry, and Dr. Saab also mentioned something about removing tariffs and working on your economies of scale. I think somebody also mentioned that the cost of doing business in Pakistan and some hint on dumping of goods within Pakistan. I believe a lot of product is already being dumped in Pakistan. Maybe we need to be selective, like there was a discussion on rationing and whether we should remove all tariffs in one shot. And maybe we need to think about what to remove and what to enhance, maybe. And which countries are taking advantage of this situation where we're not competitive, but we're going to destroy our local industry at the same time. And I believe somebody mentioned about reliable supply chain. It's important that if we just rely on imported product and don't develop our own supply chain, tomorrow, if the imports become more competitive or some other countries have their bilateral trade agreements with other better countries, will they continue to supply us at a rate and at speed and the time delivery we want? So this is something which we will not know till it's done. But what we're seeing in textiles, especially as spinners and weavers and vertical setups in Pakistan, our cost of producing has gone up substantially. And a lot of imports are coming in, though I would love to compete with the imports, but it's near to impossible. The variance is huge. And I'm not sure how we can do that, even if we are going to run 100% with the best machinery, with everything. It's not easy. And I understand there are products which we cannot produce, like the 100% polyesters or performance fabrics, and the Sialkot model. But we need to understand the Sialkot model hasn't been able to gain any scale, not yet. Are we going to be able to scale? I haven't seen any success story where there has been a scale in growth, as in we have been able to go from point A and multiply by 10 and go to, substantially increase our exports or increase our capacities. So I'm not sure what is good for the country, whether to remove tariffs or not. But like somebody mentioned, we need to look at the whole holistic picture here and not just one aspect at a time. Everything needs to be looked at. And we should not open our gates just like floodgates opening and whoever trying to sell whatever they want to in Pakistan. When you go around, a lot of imported products from shoes to caps and everything you can imagine is imported. Even a toothpick, I believe, is imported. I'm not sure which country has its industry flourishing with a lot of imports coming in. Even the US has realized, and that's why I think Trump took all those steps to negotiate a better deal. Are we going to negotiate a better deal with whoever is flooding us with their products? We need to see that. And the investments already made in this country, do we just say goodbye to them? Because I don't see a lot of people investing right now. And nothing meaningful yet. And I think large-scale industrial growth and the figures there, they say, they tell us a story. So though I have spoken quite a spectrum of things, I'm not sure what the solution is. Maybe we need to take one step at a time. And today's discussion is solely about tariffs. And I think it would be unwise just to remove tariffs without thinking hard about it, how it's going to impact, especially the employment issue of Pakistan. Are we going to be able to employ people within the country, or are we just going to keep on exporting our talent and just believe or trust them to keep on sending money back to the country? Is that the strategy we want to adopt? I'm not sure. And
Asaf, can I ask a question, which is relevant to what you're saying? I mean, there is also an argument that since we've weathered the storm of the FTA with China, which is, the arguably the world's most competitive country, what really material difference would it make? And how do you see that for the textile sector?
China is already dumping a lot of product in this country, from yarns to fabrics. And the price differences or the cost differences are huge. We can't match their prices. It's impossible. And then we have this issue of exporter importing without duty and taxes, and a lot of it being misused at the same time. And I'm not sure how the government wants to tackle that, but it is having an immense pressure on our textile industry, which is the upstream industry, the spinning and the weaving, and it's going to have impact on the farmer at the same time. So I understand that the world has moved away from cotton, but do we just want to compete on price, or do we want to be a brand by ourselves and have a good supply chain within the country, which we can rely on and work together and generate more employment? Right now, I don't see that happening. Maybe cut to pack or cut sew and pack. And in the garment industry, it will help. A lot of imported fabrics will help. No doubt about it. Maybe we can select those products and not just everything coming in, because it's something which has already had an immense impact on the industry, and it's going to get really tough going forward for a lot of people upstream. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Asfar, could I ask you to respond to some of the things that Ahmed Saab has raised, because there seem to be two very different viewpoints coming out from there.
Can I respond to some of that? So sorry, did you ask a specific person?
Asghar, I was asking you to respond to Ahmed's comments, and Manzoor Sahab, आप भी respond करना चाह रहे हैं?
Gee, but let him go. I would also like.
Okay, so Asghar, you first, and Manzoor Sahab.
Yeah, so those are very good points that Ahmed has raised. We hear that very frequently. I think, if you have to look at the background of the textile and apparel sector, we're stuck with stagnation, even though we've got some of the lowest labor costs in the world. But the industry's never flourished in terms of specializing in assembly line operations. And I think the reason is that we haven't got enough of a chance to diversify our product mix, diversify the markets. Now, if we were to import certain product categories, it would establish a benchmark for the upstream industry that here is a fabric coming at this price, which is creating a higher value product for exports, and you are free to substitute it. That's exactly what happened in Bangladesh. Bangladesh started top down. So they started importing fabrics, even from us, like pre-cure, post-cure fabrics, denim, etc. Today, they're producing their own fabrics. So they substituted whatever they saw was coming in at a regular stream. They knew the prices and the costs. So whatever suited them, they substituted with domestic manufacturing. We've got spinners who haven't innovated. Today, 70 to 80% of the product in the world market is non-cotton. And these are advanced fibers and advanced yarns coming from people like China. If we open the import, let those establish the standard and the prices at which these products are sold. Let the spinners shoot for that target and let us convert the garment industry, convert them into higher value products. Now, it will motivate the spinners to move from the lazy cotton 30 single, 20 single yarn to more advanced yarns, which have better margins because these yarns are sold at better prices. And that's how it works in our industry.
Absolutely.
The other point now that I want to raise is that the big trend in the business, in our retail and the fashion business, is postponement of production. So the more you postpone production, the higher the value of the product. So that's where the cascading part, where Ijaz mentioned, comes in and helps. Because if you've got stockists who keep fabric available to pull off the shelf and produce immediately and convert into samples and garments, you get a higher price for those products because 4 out of 10 garments are sold at full price. The rest go into discounts because they're so late into the market that you've got to forecast in a very advanced stage. Now, if you can postpone production, you get higher value for that product simply by that logic. And that means that if we've got that yarn and fabric available off the shelf on demand, our industry can light up. Same goes for the spinners. Our mills have not gone into inventory, of these fabrics, even though they are producing. But you talk to any of them, they'll say 60 days, 90 days, 30 days for delivery of those fabrics from scratch. Could take 60 or 90 days. By that time, the customer's gone. So that's another point I wanted to raise.
Can you import it quicker than that?
A lot of the Chinese keep these fabrics in stock. So yes, you can, but I think if that's why the Sialkot model is interesting, because there are, sort of a secondary market where there are stockists who are keeping these fabrics at their own risk in stock, and the garment units are pulling them from stock. And, they've got smaller clients, but those clients pay a better price, so their margins are better. But I think Pakistan, with its labor costs, this is the primary sector where we can create the employment. And we're at the threshold where if we go just a little above the productivity we have, we can be successful in competing with anyone.
That sounds like a higher value addition product as well, right?
If you want to go for higher value, you need better materials than just the 30 single or 20 single cotton yarn products.
Absolutely. Because the other thing, if you look at our landscape, we have a very, very low complexity, undiversified, and low value addition kind of export offering. So, we really need to shift the needle on that as well. So, Manzoor Sahib, you wanted to respond, and then we'll go to Mushtaba.
Nazish, also Sajid Salim.
Ji.
Unmute. Okay. Two things. One, I think there is no country has grown without imports, because it's very difficult to have anything within the country. For example, if we look at our own country, we used to have cotton. Even now, that is imported. So without imports, whether it's China or Vietnam or any country, so if China is exporting 3 trillion, it's about the same amount that they're importing, maybe a little more export side. That's one thing. Second, I think our focus is too much on textile, clothing, etc. But we have to start thinking about some other things. But there is the playing field is not even for others. For example, in case of textile clothing, the capital, machinery, etc. is zero duty. Raw materials are mostly zero duty. Maybe there's something like polyester. But if you want to produce engineering goods, if you want to import even the basic raw material steel, it's the duty, all taxes combined, will be something like 50%, and that goes on for other things. And the third thing is that it's not that China has monopolized everything and countries have given up. No one has given up. So what they are doing is that they are getting into global value chains. So whatever they compete, like Philippines is a small country, but they thought that this will not work. They cannot produce cars, etc. But maybe they can produce components. So it's like that. I mean, the countries find their niche. And unfortunately, due to high tariffs, we have not been able to get into this global value chains. And I think that's what we need to do.
नहीं, absolutely. हम लोग historically भी अगर examples देखें of the last 20, 30, 40 years of countries that have kept themselves closed or have liberalized their tariffs, and we can see what happened to their growth. But let me bring in Sajid Salim here.
Yeah, right. Great. Thank you very much. Just adding on to Aswar, I'll just make it short and borrowing from Dr. Ijaz's comments when we started out. Your government sector is your J10 thunders. Trust me. We are so excited and we see so much opportunity. I was in Washington last week and we were dealing with the USTR and a few other, the Department of Commerce. Bilateral or MFN or whatever Trump throws at us, your government industry is ready. We have the competence. Our hands are tied. Primarily because, yes, we can still import duty-free, but they're based on EFSAs and SROs and the get approval culture, which delays us. And as Asfar has pointed out, and when you're delayed, obviously your margins go down, or you have to take a loss. So it really doesn't matter. What we are saying is that if this Sialkot model that Asfar was talking about can be replicated at a major scale, which I'm very confident we can, your garment sector will deliver, and it will surprise you. And again, the thing is that this government and the budget, whatever they're making, we're not aware of the HS scores they're talking about. They're generally talking about tariff lines. So for us, we're in a suspense sort of thing now that what exactly are the HS scores they don't talk about. We have recommended a few, but I don't know if they've even looked at them or not. But that would be very, very exciting. But trust me, your government sector can deliver in the short term, both as export growth and employment, and also in the long term. And we will compete. I mean, trust me, because I've been a professional in this for almost 32 years now, and I know what I'm talking about. So let's see what they come up with, and if it is government friendly, I think you'll see the results sooner than you expect. Thank you.
I have to add something, Nazesh, if you allow me.
Gigi, please.
I have few numbers. For example, I've got 520 members. Out of 520 members, more than 50% are using EFS. Total number of EFS utility is 1,786, updated on their website. So you see how this has been used. The term is called NOS, never out of stock. And your Sialkot industry is based on that, because they will import it as a container and then they utilize it with the customer. They send them samples and they get the orders on the regular basis. That's a highly value-added orders. For example, one of my member, he's supplying to the races happens around the world, the motor and other races like horse races. So they provide the uniforms, and that's the highly value added product, and they get the very good margin in it. So when we talk about low hanging fruits, yes, we have the infrastructure already settled. Let's make a export city where we are sitting together. I give you the example of Turkey. I give you the example of Bangladesh. One tower, all departments in one tower, all R&D, because you need R&D. Where is the culture of R&D? Where is our university, how they're working, how they are integrating with the departments. When I speak to one department, they don't know the other department. And sometimes this happens that the policy has been driven and split it after 18 amendment, then is connected with the provincial mechanism. And when we speak to the provinces, they don't have any reply on that. So that's a all red tapeism. People who have, like, if I give you the example of Turkey, they have abandoned that thing. They have made one platform where everyone is connected, and these problems are resolved at the basic level. They discuss everything, and plus they are doing and adding new product lines. It's never recommended you close one line, you abandon one a part of your textile industry or other value addition, and look for the other line. You establish one line, carry on with that, and add on other lines as well. So I think it's really important to unify all the forces in one export city or a platform where everyone is sitting and talking these things, because this is going to be 24/7 discussion. This is not a 1 hour or 2 hour discussions. This is a very good idea, to connect digitally with the stakeholders, but we need to streamline it, and we need to get the results out of that. And that is, as Sajid said and Asfar said, that we are ready to deliver the word. We can triple the export of the clothing. If we get carbon neutral and these problems are resolved, we can deliver it. Because if you see, our football is going there, our the clothing is going there. We are supplying Hugo Boss, all big names, and there's an advantage, and we are already settled. So this is my take.
Thank you. And actually, if you have time at the end, maybe I'll ask Usman to talk a little bit about the red tapeism. And I know the remit is doing some really good work on the regulatory guillotine. But Mujtaba first, and then Ali Safraz, and then I want to leave some time for Anna to come in with her presentation. Ji, Mujtaba.
If I may, sorry for this interruption, Nazish. Well, I see that Stefan Derkon has joined us. Maybe Stefan at some point may want to take a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. So, Nazish, thank you. So very quickly, very insightful. So I think nobody objects to the bigger picture of open trade, competitiveness, and how export growth has occurred in other countries and should be occurring here as well, no doubt. Secondly, tariffs as a revenue-raising measure is, I think, an old debate. Like Umar pointed out, it should not be a revenue-raising measure. It can be measures for any other thing but revenues. That is a very old argument. Direct taxation, I think, is the way to go. But having said that, there are some caveats when you're going through a tariff reform. First of all, it cannot be done in isolation. As many have pointed out, all countries who've gone through export-led growth have some underlying factors that were in place, that readiness to open up, which we certainly don't have at this point in time. I'm not saying that we can't have any tariff reform, but we need to sequence, and we need to fix the other parts of the economy also while we are doing tariff reform. It's good we have, otherwise this just becomes ideological. One side is pushing one way, it's just chaotic and going on since the 90s. I think we need to settle and move forward. The other point that I want to make is that trade is not just about reforms, and we have now 3 ambassadors, WTO, current and past, sitting here. It's also about subsidies. I saw in Usman's slide 12 billion India's when we talk about agriculture. According to Keynes Group, the last I heard, Ali, was they would put out a figure of $80 billion a year of subsidy, explicit subsidy to agriculture sector. With China, everybody complains about implicit subsidies, and that debate goes on at the WTO. The anti-dumping,
The mechanisms at WTO have seized for the last 6 years. They're not working, and it is because of the US that they're not working. The whole system has been cranked down. So the other point that comes about anti-dumping is that, at the end of the day, when states come into play in trade issues, a lot of it becomes political also. That's how our regulatory duties also evolved. We signed FTAs without thinking or doing any research, and then started clamping down regulatory duties, which are not declared in the WTO schedules of Pakistan. Now, the point is that we need to have what we teach others all the time is evidence-based policy making. We need to have evidence-based, very minutely studied tariff line, tariff reductions and giving it a sequence that I was speaking about earlier. The last point I'd like to speak about is any reform in a country which is highly politicized, even in the political economy of it. And I'd refer to Adil Malik's paper on tariff, the political economy of tariffs, tariff walls here. Recently, we've had a reform in agriculture where the wheat subsidy or the public stockholding program was taken away. Great, good economics, couldn't afford it, etc. But at the same time, farmers could not even export their wheat outside their district. Okay, so reforms have to be looked at on an economy-wide level. You cannot have bits and pieces and expect the producers to survive if the other factors are not in place. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mujtaba. I think we've heard that from, I think many people in the on the discussion today that tariffs cannot be seen in isolation. We have got several other constraints, and everything has to be synchronized and working together if we were to achieve our export objectives. So Ali Sarfraz, I'll go over to you, and then to Stefan Durkon, and then Anna, if I could ask you to run us through your PowerPoint.
Thank you, Nazish, and good to see Pracha Saab here and Dr. Manzoor, my predecessors. Some of the points Pracha Saab has already mentioned, so I'm not going to highlight with respect to dumping and looking at both tariffs and subsidies and the entire structure together. Specific points on textile. We should not be a cotton country. We should not be exporting simple yarn. We should be a garment country if we look at it. And, if we want to become a garment country, then we'll start looking at other fibers, because obviously cotton as a fiber, its usage globally is really going down. That's first. Secondly, we need to find niches. That's absolutely correct. And then we should make a bet on those niche areas where we want to work. It could be critical minerals, it could be batteries, it could be some components in solar, and we should not forget digitally delivered services, which are really growing, and there's a massive growth. And we should also be looking at digital dumping, which I've been raising at WTO. And by digital dumping, I mean a Netflix or a Spotify account in Pakistan, you can get it for a few dollars. And the price outside Pakistan is actually 5 to 6 times as much. Isn't that dumping? And that has impacted some of the firms in Pakistan which actually closed down because of Spotify. So who's looking at that kind of a dumping? And I think that's very important to look at. And the final point that I want to make is we need to have we made some bets in the past with respect to certain industries. Though those bets have not worked, they have not delivered. And we should close off those bets and move on. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, Ali. And one of the things that, when we look at industrial policy, they have to be exit clauses, there have to be sunset clauses, because there is no guarantee that something's going to work. And at some point in time, you have to call it and say no more. And I think, of course, when you call it, some people are going to hurt. So we can see some of that happening now. Dr. Stefan, if we could move to you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I didn't really intend to speak, but I was very glad to listen to this conversation. Let me say just 2 or 3 quick points. So I've been very pleased to see proposals made by Pakistani economists within an outside government to actually move to a gradual trade reform, as we kind of discussed in a tariff reform. And I want to emphasize is that my understanding is this is not a big bang policy. So some of the scaremongering is not very helpful. This is a gradual 4 or 5 year policy. And I think my understanding all over the world, if you talk to private sector, they want some policy certainty. So you kind of announce your plans, what you're going to do. So 4 or 5 years in any kind of trade policy, it provides some kind of clarity you want to offer. Of course, I hope this can get fully implemented. Second point is, of course, it can't be seen in isolation. This is not a panacea. This is not a single policy that will change everything. Other people have said this. But basically, by sequencing the introduction of a tariff reform is being discussed, actually, you of course need to accelerate the complementary policies, the other things that distort. People mention industrial policy and picking winners, and I totally agree with the last speaker also. The picking winners is a very dangerous game. You want in the first instance having actually the horizontal industrial policy sensible, so basically across the board. Clarity, equal treatment across sectors, and different ways of doing it. And this is an incredibly distorted economy. So there's a lot of work to actually create that kind of relative level playing fields for capital and for labor to be allocated sensibly. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm excited by to see that the fact that the tariff reform is being discussed and tabled and hopefully pursued with full implementation creates a very clear sense of what that complementarity has to be in terms of, first of all, a horizontal industrial policy. What else there has to be, we can then debate and discuss. The picking winners is a dangerous game, but basically create an environment that is definitely really favorable for exports and do as much as you can is obviously the complementary thing. And I'm sure other people, I've definitely heard many of you mentioning it. But it is about a real direction of travel where you want to go. And it is a first step, and it's not, maybe to conclude, it's not the beginning and all, but it's basically it is the start of a process. And and we should do more things. And I better leave the floor now, given the time. But it's or leave the floor now. But thank you very much for allowing me to say something, and thank you for an insightful conversation.
Thank you so much. And Anna, over to you.
Sure, I'll make this
At long
quick.
last.
I'll make this quick because we're running short on time, and I think the most useful interventions have been from all the industries around the table. So thank you again. So just a few insights on constraints to export development that we found in our literature. Next slide. So what's the big picture? 60 billion untapped export potential based on a study that we did in 2022. Pakistan's export as a share of GDP has declined. It remains low compared to comparators. And so the urgency is there. And the sort of goalpost is also quite clear. Next slide. Next slide. And in our research, there have been a couple of structural and policy distortions that have come up. So starting from the left, Pakistan tends to be have lower productivity levels than firms in other markets. Exporters also tend to be relatively small. And if you look at the survival rate for exporters, quite a high share in Pakistan of exporters drop out of the export market after the first year. So they fulfill an export order and then next year they're unable to. And this is usually because they're either facing an unpredictable regulatory environment. They might not be able to service or meet standards and compliance, going to some of the points raised by Minister of Industries in Punjab. Next slide. And on the policy side, tariffs have come up again and again as one of the binding constraints. So from the left, you can see quite an increase in import tariffs over the years. The yellow bars are additional customs duty and regulatory duties. We've heard from many of you that these are impediments to your export competitiveness. The reforms seem to be pointing towards eliminating these. our research showed that this would enhance exports for Pakistani firms. In the middle, we're looking at these same tariffs, but then for the industrial sector. And here again, you see the compounding effect of additional customs duties and regulatory duties. So in a sense, the tariff structure right now is penalizing exporters. Inputs for exporters are expensive. They've increased over the years because of these discretionary and ad hoc measures. And hopefully the reforms are geared towards eliminating those. And on the right, we look at a graph that shows the impact of high import tariffs on firms. And from research that we've done, we show that for any 1% increase in upstream protection or upstream tariffs, firms see a reduction in their productivity, a reduction in their sales, and a reduction in their wages. So essentially, the tariff structure right now for Pakistan is anti-firm and also has an anti-export bias because of the cascading discussion we've had. Next slide. There's been a lot of conversation on the impact of these reforms on the economy. This is an area that we are interested in as well on the World Bank side. Some preliminary model estimates don't seem to support the concerns on this reform having a negative impact on the economy in the medium term. In fact, we see positive gains to exports from reforms. There will be an increase in imports, yes, but this would be more than compensated by the growth in exports. Tariff revenue actually will increase because of the output impact of these reforms. The trade balance, we see an improvement and also improvement in investments coming from them. And overall, also positive impacts on employment. So, international experience also from our side, our modeling estimates, we don't see much concern for these reforms on the macro level. Of course, there will be impacts in the short term on revenue, but if it's within the government scope to absorb, then it seems to not be that big of a problem. But like many of you said, the devil is in the details, but overall lower tariffs are macro enhancing for Pakistan and also beneficial for exporters. I will leave a link in the chat box to a note that we just published on this, which has more detail. Please feel free to take a look. And this has been a very insightful conversation. And I thank you all for the opportunity and looking forward to more of those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was very useful. I think it helps wrap up some of the comments that we've had, and I also want to thank everyone for their time. And I will ask Dr. Nabi to offer his closing comments.
Yeah.
And also, Nabi, if you could talk a little bit about how CDPR is going to use this discussion. Will you be putting out a note? I think a lot of people also referred to, what's going to happen next and will it be minuted, etc.
Yes. To answer your second question, yes, the conversations have been recorded and they will be transcribed and they will be put out. Views across the spectrum will be there. For me, this has been a fascinating 2 hours. Lots of points raised by both who have concerns about tariff reform and others. Mujtaba raised the question of empirical evidence. Mujtaba, there's enormous amount of empirical evidence now. And that evidence constitutes both country experiences, countries that are doing trade reform, tariff reform as we speak, and are benefiting from those. I speak of Turkey and Vietnam. Our own historical evidence in the 90s, we liberalized the tariffs and we got a huge export kick. We reversed these when we went into a macroeconomic crisis, primarily for revenue reasons, and we never really got rid of that. So there is plenty of, and Anna mentioned in her note, some of the simulations that have been done using CGE models, TDAP models, and these models are being used by all countries, including, I believe, by Trump's United States, to look at the impact of tariffs on imports, exports, on revenue, on growth, on employment, etc. And all of these dimensions were examined by this model for Pakistan, calibrating changes very, very carefully. So there's all the empirical evidence that we need that show that that tariff reform in itself will give you a good kick in terms of exports and in terms of GDP growth and employment generation. And of course, if we do the whole package, in other words, we fix the energy problem, we fix improve the tax area, etc. That's all additional benefits to the ones that this model has stimulated. Now, let me just conclude with one thing. Whenever I'm sitting with exporters, there is enormous energy in the room. They talk about growth possibilities, growth potentials, etc. Whenever I'm sitting with import substituting industry, it's always doom and gloom. We need to just get out. There's something happening in the export sector that exporters are very excited about. In this conversation, we've only had ready-made garments, which, by the way, is the end of the spectrum of textile chain, which really speaks to our comparative advantage. It's the least energy intensive, it's the highest labor intensive, and it's the highest value addition in exports. So that's the segment that really speaks to our comparative advantage. And these guys are always very excited about tariff reform and why it makes a huge difference. And Umar, it'll interest you, Umar, a tariff reform will stimulate small and medium enterprises. And we can have a bilateral conversation on that, because the export finance schemes are only targeted at large manufacturers who actually export and then get the benefits of that scheme. SMEs who will subcontract to the large guys will not be direct exporters. They will benefit from tariff reform. So the provincial governments will become a major focus of activity, especially your department. Department of Industry will become, and SMETA will have to play a very active role as the SME sector gets activated. And this is SMEs not just in the ready-made garment sector. This is SMEs also in light engineering. It's very similar problems. So we will see the benefits coming out there as well. So I think we need to have many more conversations. Our captains of industry are top-notch people. I'm hoping that these conversations will convince them that they should move down the value-added chain or up the value-added chain. And if you're yarn manufacturers, please think of becoming ready-made garments manufacturers. You will see the world very differently. So with that, thank you very much, Nazish, for doing this. And we are delighted to have worked with IGC, with the World Bank, and with Stefan, with former WTO ambassadors, Mustafa, Ali Sarfraz, Ali Sarfraz current. So thank you very much. And of course,
and Dr.
most important of all, and of course, Dr. Manzoor, but most important of all, captains of industry, both currently in the export sector, and I very much hope the others who will soon come into the export sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.